Yes. So this is the second lecture. I'd like to give out the nominal role. Please sign your name. Sign in. So we had an introductory class last time and a brief overview of the syllabus and some discussion. And today I'd like to go more deeply into the syllabus and get more seriously into the discussion. And I think maybe toward the end of this lecture or certainly next week, we'll be dealing with the first review question, that is to say, the question of civilization and so on. That's the first review question. So that it will be important then, because when I come to the review question, obviously we're recording the whole of these lectures, but you need to find some way of indexing the review questions so that when you come to study, you can handily sort of go from question one to question two to question three. It sort of facilitates your work. So the first thing I'm going to do is deal thoroughly with the syllabus. Okay. So picking up on the first page of the syllabus under course, the nature of the course. Let me read what I said. The course will be based on a set of in-person lectures, which will also be recorded and available for YouTube. And I sent out the first recording yesterday, and we'll do the same for this one over the weekend. Attendance is required. We have the nominal sheet, and then the setup is, just to recall, the key is those parts of the lecture that deal with the review questions, which are on the back. And those go into thoroughly, and they're important because they are the basis of the final exam, which is a take-home exam. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit. So if these review questions, they don't capture everything, but they capture most of the essential elements of the course that is being presented here. So in a way, they constitute, if you go through all the review questions and you have a mastery of them, you basically have a very good sense of the period from 1500 to 1789. You will be well grounded. Now, for the rest, of course, the rest of the, aside from the review questions and attending to those, the lecture will be an overall, I will develop various points with respect to the particular subject I'm dealing with, but also I will have side references to all kinds of things. Social theory, there's, as you go along, I mean, history has to be theoretical. It has to have a theory behind it. And so I'm going to sort of develop some theory along with the history. And also I'm going to comment on the questions of the day, what's going on in this world, because we are at war. We are in the midst of a huge change. It's an epic change we're going through, very similar to the period around 1500, when maybe you know, there was a colossal change, the Renaissance, Reformation, discovery of overseas, the printing press and the printed book, the territorial state. There was a sort of complete change in what we call the spirit of the times, or as the Germans say, the Zeitgeist. The Zeitgeist changed, the spirit of the times. There was a qualitative change in the historical period. Yesterday you were in the Middle Ages, modern times suddenly appeared in 1500 with all these colossal changes. If you add them up, and I think we are in a similar, something really big is happening today. So that so we're going to have this kind of discussion because we are in an epochal period, and so there will be references to the present and references to the past. Now, the textbooks. Now, I list this Robert Marks book. Robert Marks book is quite a good sort of mainstream text that covers this period. And it's not too long. And I give you a list of the sort of the reading assignments for each week that you should read. It's 10 pages a week in this book. And what this does, this book, the purpose of the book is to sort of support you in the sense that I'm developing this large sort of narrative and so on, but there are maybe many facts or events or causal relationships that aren't clear to you, and you can consult Marx as a supplement to what I'm saying. That's its purpose, okay? Then there are the other two books. There is my book, The Birth of Capitalism, and then there's a book by a Indian historian, a historian from India by the name of Bakshi, called Perilous Passages. And he writes from the point of view of the global South. You know, he's a brilliant historian, and he writes from the perspective of the people the Europeans imposed themselves on. He's from India, and they have a very different perspective on the intrusion of the West, obviously, than would be the perspective of people up here. So it's important to sort of include that. These two books, my book, Heller, and Bakshi, are the basis of the essay that you are going to produce. So my book is actually, and maybe Bakshi's as well, I think, are ebooks. There's a print copy over in the bookstore, but my book is certainly online. You don't even have to buy the text. You can just get the ebook and look at it in that way. I'm not sure Bakshi is also, but it's a very good book. And then we have the grading system, and the way it works, so that you know, is there is set up a spreadsheet with all your names on it, and on each assignment, I give a quantitative grade. And let's say the first assignment is worth, let's say the participation grade is 10%. So I give you an 8 out of 10. Well, that's 8 out of 10. If you look at this grading system, it's basically an A, okay? And so I put in 8 for the participation grade, then similarly grade numerically the other grades, and I just add the whole thing up at the end of term, and it comes out to a number. Say the number is 75. Well, that's a B. Okay, this is the way it translates. Okay, we've done that page. Let's move on to this page, dealing with the essays. And this is the heart of the syllabus. I want to go into this quite strongly, deeply. Maybe I'll come back to it. come back to it because I want to sort of deal with the rest of it. First of all, this written assignment, the essays, the three stages of the essay, well, this is the main sort of intellectual work you're doing in this class. And the point of the essay is to, of course, help you to learn some history, learn some theory, but above all, to get as far as possible in terms of developing your writing skills, your analytical skills, your ability to sort of organize an essay and to write cleanly and well, because this is one of the key skills that you pick up in university. So we give a lot of importance to it. And unless you complete the written part of the essay, you cannot pass this course. This is a designated writing course, as the university calls it. So you have to listen. If you're, and I know what it is like to be a student, you must turn in something, because unless you turn in something, you cannot pass. So you've got to turn in something, okay? It might not be Shakespeare, but turn in written work, because that's the only basis in which you can get through this, okay? Now, when it comes to late work, I'm liberal. If you talk to me, we can make an arrangement. If you can't meet the dates and the syllabus, let me know, and we'll find some sort of accommodation. Now, there's this thing: when you finish these successive sort of drafts and so on, you have to upload them to UmLearn. You have to upload. You don't give me a paper copy. You upload it to UmLearn, and they're marked online. And you should know that if there are signs that there's plagiarism, they put this through the machines. There are machines which basically, because the computers are so rapid that they can pick up, stuff that's been lifted from other sources. And so it's not a good idea to plagiarize work. You have to do your own work. And there are people who are just, I'm talking about the administrators, are fanatical about plagiarism, so I would warn you against it. It's not a good idea. And there's sort of talk about academic dishonesty and so on. I'll skip that. Now, academic resources. This is important. These essays are very important, but there is support in the form of this academic learning center. It's online, but it's also in Fletcher Argue, the building across the street. There is this big office, and either you can go there in person or you can go online, and they will get you a tutor. They will get you a tutor in terms of developing the essay. In order for you to sort of get some confidence and try out what you're doing and so on, you can go and get a tutor who will help you systematically build this essay. Furthermore, the history department has a special history tutor, and you can get an appointment with the history tutor, and that person will help you develop the essay. Furthermore, this academic learning center for students who do not have English as a first language, people coming from other countries who have just sort of mastered English. Well, the Academic Learning Center has special provision. There are people there who will help foreign students to develop an essay in English. Now, if you're an Indigenous student, there's an Indigenous Center, the telephone numbers and the the email address are the sort of the address online is given, and you can contact if you need support. You can consult them. Also, there's a medical service and a psychological service on this campus. And I urge you to take advantage of those things. You know, like obviously get it, and also getting your teeth fixed and all that. These things are really important, as you know. So I would take advantage of them, including the psychological service. Listen, we've been through hard time, been through really tough times. So I myself am not completely well. Okay, so you have to realize that, and if you fail Alien, I want to go further with this. The university is not a friendly place. That's my experience of it. It's a big factory here, you know. It's a huge factory. Finding friends, finding social support, it's terrible. The food is expensive and it's not very good. It's not a great place, frankly, in my opinion. It could be better. It could be a lot better for students. And so, if you run into trouble and so on, listen, take advantage of what's available here and get some support. And beyond that, there is, if you run into some difficulty with another student or even with faculty, there is a student advocate that's given here, and you have certain rights. And my experience is they actually take it seriously. So if you run into any kind of trouble, go see the student advocate. Finally, there's the History Club, the History Students Association, and I am not a joiner. I'm not. I'm a loner. But I would seriously consider joining the History Students Club because you can connect with some people. It's hard to make friends here. And my experience is that students who do this, they do meet other people, and it's a possibility for socializing. Take any advantage of any possibility to socialize. Believe me, you're better off instead of staying by yourself. So now let's come back to the essay. That's on the second page. Okay, I dealt with the final exam. I would just add that there's the indication that there are these review questions. There are 31 of them. On the final exam, I'm going to choose 9. They will all be available on YouTube and so on. Or you have to engage with those and sort of master them, develop them. And there will be 9 questions. You answer 3 questions, and you will have 4 or 5 days, because it's a take-home, to complete this examination. Then you send it to me, and I'll mark the exam. That's the final exam. Now, coming to the essay, I want to read this section rather carefully because it's important. The development of the term essay is the major intellectual task of the term. Its purpose is to help the student step by step, create a relatively short, well-written, critical, and well-organized historical essay. In other words, we're looking for really a good piece of work. And my philosophy is, if you can do one piece, relatively short, we're talking about an essay of 7 or 8 pages, that is really a good piece of work. If you do that once, you can do it
but you can always do it. And that means that you have the capacity to write a university level essay, and you can do that not only in this class, but you can do it for all of the subsequent classes, and you can do it for the rest of your life. So this is a skill which is worth paying attention to, including in terms of eventually, hopefully, getting a job at the end of this thing, because employers are looking for people who, it's actually quite rare, people who know how to critically evaluate information and put it together in some sort of report or essay are prized by employers. So this is worth 60% of the grade, the whole sort of successive development of the essay, developed through 3 stages. So the first part, which is due on the 28th of September, consists of you're getting a hold of these 2 books, Heller and Bakshi, and answering these 11 questions. That's the first assignment. What I'm talking about here is basically, this is not an essay. This is the base of the essay. This is the information required to write this essay. And so you do these essays, these 11 questions, and you organize them in sort of 3 parts. Divide up the 11 questions into 3 parts, and then write however long it takes, because I am giving you the pages in Heller and Bakshi where you can find the information to answer the question. And I'm doing this because, well, this is a considerable assignment in itself, but most of you are first-year students, and later on, when you're at a higher level, you have to find your own information. There's a whole process of going to the library and doing research. And by the way, there's something called history. Well, you go to U of M, you Google U of M Library History Subject Guide, and a kind of guide to doing historical research comes up, where to find the good books, and so on, to do historical work. This comes up. But for now, given the fact that this is a serious assignment, I'm giving you you don't have to go to the library. It's everything is in the books, and the answers to the questions asked are given on these pages. So it's relatively simple. On the other hand, understanding what capitalism is, understanding what feudalism is, understanding, the thought of Adam Smith, that's not easy. You're dealing with some concepts. So you are getting some intellectual stimulation while you're doing this, okay? So it's not merely sort of grade school or high school stuff. The material is somewhat demanding. It's not advanced physics, but there's some intellectual content. So that's the first level. This submission, which you upload on the 28th. Then comes the crucial step, which is basically writing a first draft, 2,000 words, maybe a little more if you need more space. 2,000 words, that's 6 pages, maybe 7 pages. Okay, that's the first draft of the essay. And how do you write the essay then? How do you do it? Well, in the first place, you have to find a topic. You have to find a thesis to write. And let me propose to you, I left it open, but my suggestion is there's a list of 11 questions here. if you look at question, just a second, question 3, why did capitalism develop in Western Europe and not in the rest of Eurasia? In other words, the question is, why Western Europe? Why did capitalism, which is such a powerful sort of economic system, why was it that in Western Europe this system developed? Why didn't it develop in India? Why did it develop in China? Why didn't it develop in Japan or the Middle East, for that matter? So we wanted, that's a good way in. It's a thesis and it's a way of organizing the essay. It's a way, the question is, why did capitalism develop in Western Europe and not elsewhere, okay? Because that question can help you to organize the essay. Because if that's the thesis statement, if that, why did capitalism develop in Europe? First of all, you can go to question 1. And that question is, what is capitalism? So part of the essay can be a little discussion based on what you've done about what is capitalism in the first place. So you present that. Then you can deal with the question of the question of Eurocentrism, which is connected to the fact that the Europeans did develop the system and the rest of the world did not. So that's another question, and you could add that to this essay that you're developing. And then you have the, I recommend that you seize on question 7, which is about this particular historian by the name of Wallerstein, because instead of dwelling on Western Europe, Wallerstein deals with the whole world and the relationship of European capitalism to the rest of the world. So you have the original question, why did capitalism only develop in Western Europe? You tell me what capitalism is. You tell me, you speak a little bit about Eurocentrism. Then you introduce the material from Wallerstein. And then finally, in terms of doing the essay, you discuss the fact that there is this amazing fact that in Japan, during the early modern period, all of the elements that led to European capitalism were present in Japan. And it's a very interesting counterexample to Europe. So you could discuss the relationship between European capitalism and Japan as an economy. And as you know, in terms of Asian history, as soon as Japan came into contact with the world economy, capitalism appeared virtually instantly in Japan, and Japan became the pioneer Asian country in the development of capitalism. So if you take that together, what I'm saying, if you deal with the questions that I've in succession, these particular questions, you will have basically an answer to the question posed in number 3. Why did capitalism develop in Western Europe and not elsewhere? Now, just let me sort of develop this in terms of its form. So we have these successive questions that you're going to present in sequence, which is going to be the basis of an essay. I'm proposing this. You don't have to follow this. I'm proposing this as an outline. If you conceive things differently, go right ahead. It's not a problem. So, in terms of the form of the first draft, the preliminary draft should open with the first paragraph which describes the thesis or argument of the paper. Why did capitalism develop only in Europe? That's the opening paragraph. It continues by presenting the answers given in part one into a narrative or consecutive argument, elaborating the thesis of the opening paragraph. And then, so there's an introductory paragraph which presents the thesis. Then there is the main body of the narrative, which presents the answers to the various questions that I've indicated. And then there is a conclusion. You reach some sort of conclusion, and you say in the conclusion, I argued in the following, you sort of sum up what you've done, and you conclude by saying, well, I've explained why capitalism only developed in Western Europe. So there is an opening paragraph, there is the main body, which presents the material and the questions, and then there is a conclusion. And if you do that, that's an essay. That will be an essay. But you have to think about all of this as you're going along. And I would say in that respect that you have to give thought to what you're doing. You have to, on the bus going home or wherever you're doing it, think about the shape of the essay. Yes?
Are we going to see an example of a completed essay or something to sort of?
That's a good point, and I'll try and do that.
All right, thank
Try
you.
and do that for you. Yeah, okay. So basically, that's what's entailed in doing an essay. And this is the first draft. And then the last assignment is basically that will be marked and handed back to you with suggestions for changes. And then the last part is essentially, with some supplementary questions, is essentially to correct the second draft. It's basically correction or slight addition. It should involve no more research. It's merely working on a better draft. This is just the way writers work, okay? This is what you're doing. And so there's this editorial work, finishing the essay. And hopefully what you will have at the end is a really good, sort of logical, well-written, well-organized essay, which becomes then a model for your subsequent work. That's what I would say. So that basically sums up the syllabus. Are there any questions about this? Yes.
I have two questions.
What's that?
I have two questions. For the preliminary questions, do you want it to be like mini essays with citations and stuff?
No, I just want you to, from the pages listed,
So we don't have to like
the
cite
two
them.
pages. No, you don't have to have formal apparatus. Just say the pages from which you drew the information. Okay? Yeah.
Would it be acceptable to write our essay in Chicago style?
What's that?
Would it be acceptable to write our essay and cite it in Chicago style?
You're asking about the form?
Yeah, like the format of the essay.
Oh, well, there are these various forms. I guess I prefer the Chicago style. There's a manual style known as the Chicago manual style. It's online. In terms of citing footnotes and so on, bibliography, the Chicago manual style is what I would prefer. Yeah.
And then also, like, what kind of, is there a specific font or double spacing that you prefer? Is there anything that way?
Double space. I'm not that finicky, but double space is good.
Double spacing.
Okay. Okay, so having done that, I'd like now to begin to give you an overview of this course. This is basically a broad view of where it begins and where it ends, okay? So we saw that the course starts with, it starts with the beginning of capitalism, the discovery of the New World, with the appearance of the sovereign political state, the territorial state, with the printed book, with the Renaissance, with the Reformation, 1500. There is this dramatic change from the Middle Ages into modern times. That's where it starts. And it goes through the looking at European history, but also European history in relationship to the histories of these different parts of the world. It takes you down to the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution. These two twin revolutions that occur at the end of the 18th century marks the end of the course. And of course, it means the breakthrough of the Europeans, the West Europeans, who at the start of this period are really on the periphery of things, but they come to dominate the world by 1789, 1800. Now, the dynamic element which is enabling the Europeans to do this, of course, is capitalism. Capitalism, which not only allows the creation of a very strong state, England, France, Holland, with powerful armies and navies, supported underneath by powerful economies, and of course, the military technology, the cannons, the rifles, the great ships, which enabled the Europeans to dominate the high seas and to basically invade other parts of the world. Behind the whole thing is the development of this unprecedentedly dynamic economy, which is emerging between 1500 and 1789. And the takeoff point was basically a subsistence economy, feudalism. Preceding capitalism was a system which we call feudalism. So what was feudalism? Feudalism was basically a system where the great majority of people were what we call subsistence peasants. They basically produced food to feed their families. But in order to produce that food, the land that they produced the food on was not actually completely controlled by them. There were landlords, noblemen, who basically owned the land. And the only way that these peasants could get access to the land was to pay rent to these landlords. So it was a system of exploitation. It was a class system in which most of the people were subsistence peasants, and they paid rent to these landlords. And this was a system which was not very productive, and it was, of course, very exploitative at the same time. Well, through a series of changes, a series of permutations, gradually a new system, and I'm using this word particularly, infiltrated into this feudal system. It started to infiltrate. This is capitalism. Capitalism didn't immediately replace feudalism. What it did was it crept in. This new system of production and distribution, it crept into feudalism and gradually undermined it after 1500. And we see the finality of this precisely with the Industrial Revolution and the French Revolution, which were capitalist. Capitalism takes over completely in 1789, but it starts in 1500, so that's important. Now, having said that, we should note that in 1500 still, as I indicated a little bit earlier in the lecture, Western Europe was a backwater. if you look around, the immediate neighbor to Western Europe was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was whereas the European powers were divided up and fighting one another, France against Spain, against England, etc., etc., the Ottoman Empire was an enormous thing and growing in 1500, extended over virtually the whole of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And the Sultan in Constantinople had an enormous army. So, and likewise, if you look at India, same thing. You have what's called the Mughal Empire, another Muslim empire, and it was a unified state with the military forces that were as the equal or better than the Europeans. And finally, you look at China. Well, my God, China was a world empire unto itself, a colossus, a unified state, highly developed civilization that goes back to the period of the Roman Empire, whereas Europe experienced the Dark Ages. China never experienced anything like that. There's a continuous history from antiquity down to modern times. Extremely powerful, highly developed culture and intellectual life, philosophy, and so on. So Western Europe was, and even from an economic point of view, I would say that China was ahead of Europe at this point. Yes?
You mentioned that capitalism allowed the creation of a strong state. Well, then how did China have such a strong state at this time?
How did they produce it? Well, they had an enormous territory where they had a centralized bureaucracy which was able to draw taxes from this whole area, and they had the bureaucracy was the most well qualified. If you look at the bureaucracies of the other the states I mentioned, including the West European, they're nothing like China. You had to sit an examination in order to become a bureaucrat. You had to have intellectual qualifications. Whereas that was not the case in Europe. All you needed was a good family, and maybe you need sort of a religious license. But the Chinese had the best bureaucrats in the world, and so it was a powerful state. And all of the other sort of Asian states looked to China as the model. So I would say that basically the contacts between these different areas prior to the Europeans beginning to trade, breaking in after Columbus and Vasco da Gama and so on, before that, trading relationships existed, but they were not significant from an economic point of view. Nevertheless, there was some contact. I would say that what we conclude that there was a rough equilibrium between the different empires, the different great states in the world, up to 1500. A good term is equilibrium in terms of the balance of power between these different states. However, by 1789, you have a dramatic, I'm contrasting 1500 with 1789 now, you have a completely different situation. The major European states, which were England, France, and Holland, were masters of all 7 oceans of the world. Their sailing ships were everywhere, and they had developed the military technology. And as a result of that, the other empires in this world had already been either been conquered or were about to be conquered by the Europeans. So, rough equilibrium in 1500. By 1789, European dominance. And again, underneath it is this capitalism. Latin America, as a matter of fact, already in the 16th century, the great empires of Latin America, which there was no knowledge of these. I'm talking about the Aztecs and the Indian and the Incas. The whole of Latin America and Central America fell to the Europeans already in the 16th century. The Portuguese in Brazil and the Spanish in the rest of Latin America. They just took over. By 1789, the Ottoman Empire, which dominated the whole of the Near East, it wasn't directly occupied by the Europeans, but economically and politically, the Ottoman Empire had become subordinated, particularly to the French and the English, by 1789. And even India had been this great Muslim empire, the Mughal Empire. The British, using relatively small numbers of troops, were able to actually conquer India in the middle of the 18th century. They imposed the British, and it's really extraordinary because the numbers that the British had were quite limited, and always were quite limited. And they were able to dominate millions and millions of people in India, which gives you the sense of the power. The size is nothing, but the power of the British, who were in the avant-garde when it comes to the development of capitalism. So there's that. And even China, under the growing impact of Europeans, and also because there was a certain internal decay, but the European impact in the form, how did China get undermined? Does anybody know? Yes.
The Opium Wars.
What?
The Opium Wars.
Yes. They sent dope, they sent opium, the British, into China. And that other things were going on as well, but they literally undermined Chinese society. And China collapsed under the intrusion of especially the British, but then the other powers intruded. So there was a certain fragility to these empires, but above all, it reflects the power of the European economies and political formations. Now, capitalism, you should understand, is based on the rise of what we call the middle class, or the bourgeoisie. I said that feudalism was based on peasants and landlords. Well, what happens is that between the landlords and the peasants, there emerges a class of merchants, a class of manufacturers, a class of craftsmen, highly skilled, enterprising craftsmen. This is what we call the middle class, the bourgeoisie. They live mainly in the towns. And it's this class which is the class which is advancing capitalism. That's the one of the themes here is the rise of this middle class, okay? And alongside the rise of the middle class is the emergence of these powerful states with their bureaucracies, I mentioned, territorial states, which have the function of organizing a market and of controlling labor. These states in France and England and Spain and in the Low Countries, in Holland and so on, is very important. So you have the rise of the middle class, you have the emergence of the territorial state, which is intimately connected to capitalism and the middle class. And you also have the means of violence, warfare, the development of powerful new weapons, obviously based on gunpowder, cannon, and so on. These are the elements which are behind this thrust. And of course, it enables the Europeans. By 1789, they dominate certainly the seas. They're undermining the other empires, but they're not directly politically taking over. It's subsequently, in the 19th century, that the British, the French, the Dutch actually seize politically. They basically take over the global South. They take over all of the other parts of the world. Europeans come to dominate. And at the end of this, of course, the United States also gets into the act. Now, the last thing I want to say is that this was not a peaceful process. War was a constant. There was never a year between 1500 and 1789 when somewhere or other, European powers were not involved in war. Either they were fighting non-European peoples or they were fighting between themselves. Warfare, because you have to understand that this all emerges from the nobility, the state, the nobility, they hang on and their function is fighting. And the Europeans are extremely aggressive. But also, so there is this externalization of violence, but also internally, there's a lot of struggle between the different classes. And I would say that revolution plays a key role in the rise of the middle class. Well, I'll pick this up next time.